First of all, let's talk about what has been achieved so far. Lots of moving parts at this OPEC seminar, but what would you say is the key takeaway?
Well, I think we've heard that OPEC Plus, the market's trying to parse basically why OPEC Plus has been doing what they've done in the last couple of months and raising production quotas in a market that is relatively weak. And what are the motivations behind that? And what we've heard in the last couple of days is that OPEC Plus knows what they're doing. The minister is saying, trust the process. We control OPEC Plus, these 22 countries control some 40% of the market. So we have a pretty good pulse on what's going on. And what they see right now is that the market is actually perhaps tighter than what a lot of people think it is. People think that the market's oversupplied. But right now, we heard the UAE Energy Minister, Suhail Al-Mazrouei, yesterday tell reporters that, look, the market's been absorbing our barrels. There's not been a stock build, even though we've been releasing increasing amounts of oil every single month, last couple months. And that's an indication that the market is needing our barrels. And what we've seen is that the big question, of course, though, is what happens later this year, right? And this 2.2 million barrels per day of cuts that they are unwinding by October, what happens next? And certainly there are a lot of analysts, our analysts at S&P Global Commodity Insights, they see an oversupply potentially once these cuts are unwound of up to 600,000 barrels per day by October, and perhaps going even further than that by the end of the year. And if that bears true, the oil price could be well below what it is right now. And also, this 2.2 million barrels per day of cuts, it's one of several layers of overlapping cuts involving different members. There's a total of 5.8 million barrels per day of cuts over the last couple of years that OPEC Plus has been doing. So once this round of 2.2 million barrels per day is up, what's next? And this group of 8 that's cutting, do all members continue to release barrels going forward? Or does it become a group of less than 8, a group of 1, Saudi Arabia, that's kind of dictating what's happening in this market with the consensus of the group, of course. What's going to happen now? OPEC Plus, of course, would say that they are doing this monthly. They meet monthly. They're in control of the market. They can respond. They can accelerate the cuts, decelerate the cuts, pause the cuts as needed. And so that's going to be responsive to the needs of the market, even as it gives the market maybe a little less clarity on what's going to happen over the medium term.
Indeed, and I thought the Saudi energy minister made that point quite clearly yesterday during his speech. And yes, he stopped short of commenting on the most recent conflict in the region, but what he did say was really a doubling down on the energy transition, which some analysts have suggested might actually be OPEC maybe laying the groundwork here for maybe adding more barrels, saying that the world needs more oil to protect against these shocks. Are you reading much into that?
Yeah, one of the big themes here that we've heard at the OPEC seminar here is the need for the industry to keep investing. And now later today, OPEC is going to release their world oil outlook. That's their long-term oil market forecast. And if history holds the form, and I expect that it will, OPEC is probably going to double down on the notion that there's going to be no peak oil demand on the horizon, certainly not through the forecast period through 2050. And so the world's going to need a lot more oil. We've heard that from not only OPEC ministers, but also some of the CEOs, the big CEOs that came here from some of the big IOCs. That the world's going to need a lot more energy. We hear a lot about AI energy demand, very energy intensive. It's going to ramp up energy demand. Now, that's not necessarily a direct correlation to oil per se, but we've also got the emerging markets of Africa and, of course, the huge key economies of China and India. They're going to drive a lot of what happens in the oil story. So according to OPEC's accounting, the world's going to need a lot more oil, and accordingly, the world's going to need to invest in a lot more upstream production, and some of that involves OPEC members themselves. And again, we heard the UAE Energy Minister Suhail Al-Mazrouei say that even countries that are blessed with a lot of oil resources, they've got to pay attention to this. They've got to get more serious about investing in oil, because that call on OPEC crude is going to rise further to meet this future demand. So, we're going to need a lot more oil, and a lot of that has to come from the existing producers.
Talk to me about the geopolitics as well. This has been a real headline driver for the market. I thought it was interesting, and Steve made this point just before, so let's pick up on it. What we've seen is a ramp up of one incident, at least, in the Red Sea, Iran-backed Houthi rebels taking down this commercial ship. Of course, we also see the ceasefire talks between Iran and Israel holding. What is the status of geopolitics in the region, and to what extent is that impacting the price?
Yeah, absolutely. All this stuff that's happening, the OPEC plus decisions on production levels, the talk about the need to invest in energy transition, all this is happening in a market that has been as volatile as the Vienna weather has been this week. Right. And so it's a challenge for OPEC plus. And yes, there's not a lot of direct mentions of the war, of the geopolitics that have been influencing the market over the last couple months. But clearly, this is something that's top of mind, and obliquely, we've heard a lot of energy ministers talk about energy security, and that's become really, it started with the Russia-Ukraine war, and now the events of Israel-Iran, the conflict there, the 12-day conflict, that's really heightened the need, heightened the senses in terms of the need for energy security. The threats to the Strait of Hormuz, that's a critical waterway. 20% of the world's oil transits through that waterway. If in the very unlikely case that it is closed, it's a low probability, high impact event, and we all have to think about, how we get our oil out. And I know a lot of the countries in the Gulf region moving around oils, different pipelines, storage facilities to try and prepare themselves for the possibility that this could happen. You mentioned the attacks in the Red Sea. The Red Sea is another vital conduit for not just oil, but all kinds of shipping goods that transit through the Gulf, the Red Sea, the Bab al-Mandeb, as well as the Suez Canal. And we've seen what's happened with Red Sea shipping. A lot of shipping have to go around the Cape of Good Hope. Increasing costs, increasing time factors, disrupting global trade. So energy security really is coming to the forefront.